Shooters in Splatoon 1 were slower and less distinct from each other, which is pretty standard. Over the course of Splatoon 2 though, they were the main candidates to get buffs, with 52 having the highest amount in the game, which eventually ended up overtuning them since the specials and main power-up damage up ability ended up invalidating the unique traits of many other weapons in that game. However, they miraculously survived going into Splatoon 3 with basically no nerfs, and even got a few more buffs over time, which have ended up leaving them in a mostly balanced spot due to the removal of those Splatoon 2 mechanics that nerfed their competition. This means that shooters now, compared to Splatoon 1, are faster, more powerful versions of their former selves. They also were slowly made more distinct over time, with changes like Splash getting no jump RNG and Zap getting more damage to separate the two previously very similar weapons. Currently, shooters are in the most fair spot they've ever been, and I'd give them a total of 7 out of 10. Rollers. This is the first of many classes to be broken in early Splatoon 1, but also a lot more basic than we have now. They still rolled, but did not speed up and only had a horizontal flick. However, at the beginning of Splatoon 1, the entire hitbox could kill you, which made them very broken in the early game. Splatoon 2 seemed to drastically rework rollers, giving them a vertical flick that could reach further, but was slightly slower, which also came with horizontal flick basically getting gutted on literally every roller in the game, being almost unusable. It did, however, also let rolls speed up over time a little bit. Splatoon 3, though, has seemed to make it its mission to restore horizontal flicks, giving all of the rollers significant buffs that don't make them the exact same as Splatoon 1, it's not the entire hitbox, but do restore its old functionality, putting this class in the best spot it's ever been in, where I'd even argue they're better than the Splatoon 1 rollers due to having more options between its multiple flicks. Besides Dynamo, since Dynamo still doesn't have its old pains. Maybe one day. I'd give rollers an overall 8 out of 10. Definitely the class that Splatoon 3 improved the most. Charges were another really broken class in early Splatoon 1, this time because partial charges were able to one-shot in that game, further improved by the ability Damage Up, which even Splatoon 1 tried to fix, making it require Damage Up and nerfing the range of partial shots by an extra 20%. They also made E-Liter and Spot Charger a little bit more similar to each other, as they used to be very different. Scopes in Splatoon 1 were also just the better version until in Splatoon 2, where charges would start to get a little bit of a rework as well. The partial charge having less range got completely reverted, along with the removal of Damage Up, mostly. In exchange, unscoped chargers now have a charge hold in order to enhance the mobility options for unscoped chargers, which ended up closing the power gap between it and scoped chargers, which had more range. Besides that, the changes to the charger class are a bit more specific, with the longer range ones getting general paint nerfs, while Squiffer got a unique mid-air charge speed, Gootsuber got a partial ring, which had visual clarity added in Splatoon 3, and Bamboo got a little bit better and then got Damage Up, with MPU Damage Up making it broken for the second time due to being able to do 99.9, which of course got fixed with its removal of main power-up in Splatoon 3, and it also reverted some of the main power-up nerfs for that weapon. In Splatoon 3, charges haven't really gotten as many changes as Splatoon 1 and 2, probably because they were such a big deal in those games, but they ended up being in a mostly balanced spot, with the new one dominating the game but not too badly for about a year and counting. Their current spot is an overall 6 out of 10. Sloshers haven't had much of a core identity change since the beginning of Splatoon 1. About half of them are stronger than they launched, like Slosher having the consistent 50 minimum, Tri-Slosher shooting faster and fixing a dead zone, and Dreadringer being more ink efficient, while the other half ended up being slightly worse than their original incarnations, with Explosher having paint and radius size decreases, Blob having way less damage per second, and Sloshing Machine having some harsh nerfs to its speed and ink efficiency in Splatoon 3. There isn't really a distinct direction, but Sloshers have rather consistently been one of the better classes since the beginning, and these days are still one of the best ones, even the options that got nerfed. I'd give it an overall 7 out of 10, but I think the nerfs to Expo and Machine could be reverted a little bit. As for Splatlings, I talked about this class before in its own video, since it's the most stagnant with issues that have been around since Splatoon 1. However, these weapons did have a trend of getting overall mobility nerfs going into Splatoon 2 with its run speed that slowly got reverted into buffing them back. For more details, check out the video I did, but since then Mini Splatling has continued to recover to being even stronger than its Splatoon 1 incarnation, despite its harsh nerfs as a meta pick at that time, and Ballpoint has a unique history of being one of the most broken main weapons ever on launch, and then it got a little bit over-nerfed. For the most part though, Splatlings are very close to being good with a lot of unique variations, but struggle with similar issues since the beginning in regards to matchups versus chargers. Though I do hope that the endgame patches of Splatoon 3 will focus on getting rid of that issue. I'd give them an overall 6 out of 10. Next up is blasters, another weapon class very different during the start of Splatoon 1. The blast radiuses they're known for were generally larger and did more maximum damage, capping at 80. Radius sizes are measured in units, with Splatoon 1 having Luna/Blaster at 4.0 and Range and Rapid having a radius of 3.5. Splatoon 2 ended up nerfing blasters pretty hard, as well as the indirect changes I mentioned previously, like specials hurting the weapon class. They also had their max damage reduced from 80 to 70. Normal Blaster got a pretty huge mobility buff, and Rapid was pretty good in early Splatoon 2 though, which meant both of those got their radius sizes nerfed again from 3.5 to 3.3, which way down the line in Splatoon 3 would also happen with the Range Blaster, meaning all mid to long range blasters have a radius size of 3.3 as the maximum, a huge decrease from the highest of 4.0. As for the short range blasters, Luna Blaster and Clash were handled in a different direction, with both of them getting various radius size increases and Luna getting a little bit better of a jump spread. In addition, all blasters benefited from Splatoon 3's addition of Intensify Action Up, which allowed them to have much better jump RNG in the air, making directs more consistent while moving. Finally, Rapid blasters have an entire unique history in this, as in Splatoon 1, the blast radius had a variable amount of damage, making it a 4 to 3 shot, and its direct and sparks dealt less damage, which got reworked into the Rapid numbers we know today in early Splatoon 2. Overall, I like the directions blasters have gone in. While their radius size and thus overall blast radius are much smaller than they used to be, directs being emphasized more and a bit better mobility have retained their power, especially against certain specials in Splatoon 3, making them feel more versatile than previous games similar to rollers. I give it an overall 8 out of 10. A little bit more buffs to the Luna and S-Blast would be great for helping some of the shorter range ones though. Brushes don't have a whole lot of history either here. In Splatoon 1, they had a unique mechanic being damage overlap, where the brush and the ink outside of it had unique hitboxes, and by hitting both, you could do extra damage. Most notable with Octobrush, since it would make it a potential 2-shot. In Splatoon 2, this mechanic was removed, in addition to giving them a slight damage buff. And over time, they've gotten several buffs, making them a little bit more mobile, helping their range a little bit, etc, etc. As for Ink Brush, this has left it as a pretty stable identity as a mobile brush, but while Octobrush retains the power it did in Splatoon 1, it has a lot less depth. And with only 3 weapons in this class, as Paintbrush was the last new brush to be added in Splatoon 3, it's one of the least represented. Balanced just fine, but it doesn't feel like there was as much done as what could have been, so I'd give it a 5. Now we jump to weapons that have started in Splatoon 2, so we have a little less history to go off of here. Dualies were generally made a lot faster over time. It's hard to remember just how bad and slow old dodge rolls were at the beginning of Splatoon 2, and almost across the board all of them were made better, with a notable shout out to Dualie Squelchers getting slides on their dodge rolls, which originally didn't even have that mechanic and has become a staple of the weapon. In Splatoon 2, they ended up being relatively hurt by main power-up damage up, which punished players who went through enemy ink by allowing other weapons to kill in fewer shots. This made Dualie's unique mechanic and ability to go through enemy ink feel unusually punishing, so that also felt a lot better when it was changed in Splatoon 3. Across the board, Dualies are in a relatively good balance spot, with the main weapons feeling like much stronger incarnations of their previous ones, with my only real critique here being that Dualie Squelcher, which benefited from having damage up itself, got nerfed pretty harsh at the end of Splatoon 2, and none of these changes have been reverted back like several other main power-up weapons, which makes the weapon feel a little bit inconsistent with its damage and shot spread, so I hope some of that gets tweaked later. Overall though, Dualies have been handled very well. I'd give it an 8. Brellas in Splatoon 2 started off pretty undertuned, but very quickly got giga buffed in 1.4, giving them much better stats all around, with most notably being a bit better shields. Tent and normal Brella would get slowly nerfed over time though, eventually being in relatively solid spots, though due to Brella still being pretty common, it got a sizable damage nerf later that basically killed off the weapon's use rate even in Splatoon 2. In Splatoon 3, the nerfs have been reverted a little bit, but most of the history of buffs for this game seems to be trying to fix Brella shield bugs, which to their credit, have left Brella shields feeling much more consistent than in Splatoon 2. However, the main weapons are incredibly underpowered. While Tent ended up being mostly fine, Brella has no damage, Recycle has no shield, and Undercover doesn't have either. Considering these have been the worst class in the game since launch, the lack of powerful buffs to them has made them overall feel like it takes too much effort for the amount of value you could get with them, and the buffs need to go around their core problem. Brellas and Shooters are both similar in the fact that they heavily benefited from Splatoon 2's specials and MPU damage up, nerfing the other weapon classes that would normally counter them. But where Shooters didn't get too many nerfs and ended up being balanced indirectly, Brella's nerfs combined with the indirect nerfs of transitioning between games is the main culprit for their current spot. Can't give them anything higher than a 3. Stringers on launch also started off relatively underpowered. However, the buffs have been really good for this. Reflux got slightly reworked to not be completely broken at turfing, but got faster mobility, easier one-shots to land, and a unique mid-air charge speed similar to Squiffer, whereas Tri-Stringer got relatively better stats overall to its damage, paint, and mobility, which definitely also benefited Wellstring, as it launched with the same damage on the explosions that Tri-Stringer did. Overall, Stringers haven't had too much history, but they're in a much more solid spot than they were at launch, with most of the work needed to balance these weapons already being done. I'll give it a 6. Splatanas have just done well since launch. Wiper got a very impactful buff leaning into its mobility, whereas Decapitator and Stamper have been very good at the start. While Stamper has needed some nerfs, this is one of the few top tiers to not be over-nerfed over time, with its stats being relatively well balanced even to this day. This is going to be an easy 9 out of 10 for me. Overall, most weapons trended to a positive direction over time, with Splatoon 3 deserving a bit more credit for buffs to the main weapons and less harsh nerfs raising the power level compared to Splatoon 2. Splatoon 1 and 2 had a lot more harsher changes that S3 had to work through, and it seems this more conservative approach is mostly worth it, though there could have been a few more buffs for sure, with Brellas being the only class that are really lacking. Obviously, I couldn't cover every change possible in this video due to the scope of it, but I hope you all have enjoyed this format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.